I want to talk a little bit about problems of practice. So going into curriculum implementation, you always want to be thinking about what problems might you be challenged with so that you can then account and for them and kind of anticipate them and avoid perhaps making some of them. We know that, that really there's a fast-paced change impacting curriculum right now. And so you're really, an instructional design manager, right? Really kind of thinking, you're looking at what was done, you're looking at what is happening, and you're looking at what's coming down the pike. So you're always kind of thinking about how do I take those trends in curriculum and really make sure that they are, informing the work we're doing with our own programming. We also know that curriculum can sometimes be unresponsive to local needs. So I, kind of use this visual to kind of make you see that, what may need to work for an urban environment may look different for what would work in a rural or suburban environment. So you really need to be thinking about, what is it that you need to do to address that. An example, I think I mentioned this in class 2 weeks ago, was when we purchased the units of study, and one of the references they made was to Game of Thrones, and that was something that was used up in Harlem in a city setting, and that may be more acceptable than using that reference in a rural or more conservative setting. So you want to be thinking about how is the curriculum, responsive to what's going on around the community. We also know that there are schools, many of them lacking the resources that are needed for implementing curriculum. So if you're going to implement curriculum that is very inquiry based or problem based or learner based, first of all, just the design of this room doesn't really lend itself to that. And you can even see there are kids who don't have adequate seating, let alone, really that idea of a flexible grouping situation. So there's all kinds of things that are going to be related to having those adequate materials. And of course, the biggie is if you don't have organizational support for implementing curriculum. So you really need to have from top down leadership, and I should say top down and bottom up, that supports the implementation of the curriculum and why it matters for our students. Some other problems of practice, right, is that sometimes as leaders, we lack the freedom and authority to exercise a leadership role. And so the superintendent more controlling? Is the assistant superintendent more hands-on? Are the principals less receptive to, district changes? So you need to be thinking about all of those things. You also need to be mindful that there are varied administrative functions that can get in the way of curriculum monitoring and evaluation and implementation. So we don't want to get bogged down with those things, and we want to be mindful of them. So when you're planning curriculum implementation, you need to be thinking about, well, what are some things that are going to occur throughout this process that are kind of those administrative functions, and build them right into the calendar of your work. And we'll look at some examples of these shortly. And there's also kind of inadequate reward systems in place, right? That we're kind of punishing or rewarding things that aren't actual valuable instructional goals. And so, whether that's, being rewarded for PSSA systems or just a lot of external motivation and not a lot of internal motivation, that can be a problem for implementing curriculum. And then, of course, you have unfavorable school policies. And so, you want to be thinking about, what are we doing, and is it relevant, and is it going to get in the way of a school policy, or is the policy getting in the way of what's best in practice? And so I use this visual, one size does not fit all. So you're going to want to be thinking about, what does that mean for curriculum implementation where you are? And you can think even about the kind of learner that we are going to be challenged with, right? You could see here's another visual of the different students to plan for. When you're developing curriculum, I always kind of use the mantra, don't plan for I should say, I call them the bookends. Don't plan your curriculum based on the student who's way above the top and way below. You plan the curriculum for a standard that everybody should meet. And then you have to be mindful of how do we accelerate kids who need more and how do we remediate kids who perhaps need less. And of course, we have to anticipate what our teachers are going to be thinking, right? And so this is another good visual of, teachers thinking that they don't have time, they need more training. I've always done it this way. I'm using the textbook, so I have to follow it. Teach the tests. Don't have the resources. I might lose control of the class if I do more of that inquiry or project-based learning. And you get the idea. So when we think about, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, we know that each component of the triangle, whether you're talking about curriculum, whether you're talking about instruction or assessment, should be used to inform the other components, which are then directed towards getting us towards this idea of college, career, and community readiness, right? So in order for any student to benefit from a challenging curriculum and high quality instruction, she has to be able to communicate what they know and can do. Communicative competence, right, is really an important, it's really kind of the base. And so consistent communication intervention is needed to ensure that students can access the content, right? Over past several decades, powerful insights have been gained into how students represent knowledge and develop competence in specific content areas, as well as how the tasks and situations have been designed to provide evidence for inferences about what students know and can do for students across a full range of performance. And so this last kind of visual here kind of is a nice way to be thinking about, asking yourself, curriculum, does it align to local standards? Assessment are there common assessments aligned to the curriculum? Is the expected performance on assessments appropriate? And does the instruction meet student needs? And of course, we want to be thinking about values, times, and interventions. So I thought while we're talking about assessments, you want to be thinking about a plan for assessment. So this is just an example of, right on my screen here, that you can see that in each grade, in each of the core subject area, there are specific assessments that are designed for looking at that. Are we meeting those state standards, right? We have course assessments, but we also have those common assessments across courses. So this is a way that you can monitor how students are doing. And by the way, I will have this as a resource right on Blackboard if you want to download. This is we started this document back in 2014, but you see we updated each year. I just happened to pull an older copy, but they're not too far off. We also have them at the elementary level. So you can see starting in kindergarten, we have assessments and that go across. And even you'll see on the second page, there's a calendar or a key that, you can really see, what is the assessment? Why are we giving it? What are we using it for? And the like. The last thing I thought I'd show you is this. Here's just an example of criteria for intervention. So we actually have four different criteria that we use, and this is a language arts example, but we have it in math, where we have an assessment and we look at all three data points and really look at, are the students on, below, or significantly below benchmark? And so here are the 3 different assessments. And you'll see here, I'm just going to use first grade as an example. If the student is reading at a level E or above, is spelling at a level A, and that's an assessment we get, and has approximately 74 sight words in November, they're considered on level. Whereas a student who's reading at a level D, which is like a late kindergarten level, is not spelling with beginning consonants and has a lower uh, high frequency sight word number, we start to get concerned. And lastly, if they're really below in these areas, then they're significantly of concern. And so these are the kind of kids that we're targeting our intervention for, and we look at this across the system. So when you're planning curriculum, and you're going to want to be thinking about that first step of what's the assessment design that's really going to kind of get at this what we're talking about here in terms of common assessment. Is it appropriate? Is the instruction kind of getting us there? And what other factors do we need to look at?